Let's go to the spokesperson for CSIRO's NASA's tracking station, Glen Nagle. Glen, what did you think of this?
Well, yeah, it's another day and another scrub, but they're doing it with good reason. It's really safety. This is a totally new vehicle, never flown before. They want to make sure that everything is absolutely perfect so that we get a great mission to the moon.
It sounds a bit more like, if you just read the story, an oil leak, it sounds a bit like my old Kingswood in 20 odd years ago. It's obviously a lot more complex.
Yeah, actually, I was thinking myself that it's a little bit like that odd hose fitting that just has that little tiny spray of water coming out that you can never quite fix. But in this case, yeah, it's the connection point between the fueling lines and the actual rocket itself. They detected a tiny leak, and even a tiny leak is enough to get them worried. So they want to make sure that they have a perfect seal so that they can get a great launch.
Why haven't we gone back to the moon? A lot of people ask that question. Here we are in 1969. It's over 50 years ago when, Neil Armstrong took one small step for man. It's been a long time.
Yeah, we actually never stopped going to the moon. Well, we certainly did with human beings, but robotically, we've kept going. And lots of different nations are actually at the moon right now with vehicles orbiting around the moon. And of course, future plans to land more vehicles on the surface, particularly commercial missions now, because the way of space exploration these days is that you've got the entrepreneurs out there, all these small companies and large companies busy out there exploring our solar system. And the moon is an interesting target because it actually has a lot of promise for potential resources that we could use here on Earth, but also for future missions further afield, going off to places like Mars. So lots of interest in the moon. We've kept going, and now it's just time to get back there with humans.
What's the general feel on Mars? I know it's very difficult to predict the future, and we just heard that in that media conference, but do you think we're talking 10, 20, 30, 50 years before we might possibly see a craft and human beings that can go to Mars for a squiz?
Yeah, I think it'll actually probably be more in the area of about 20 to 25 years. We're not in a race anymore. They'll go when they're ready. And that's what the Artemis missions are really all about, to ensure that we can go to the moon, build a base of operations there, learn how to live and work in space for long periods of time in a place that's not too far away from the Earth. So if you had a problem, you can get home again or get resources. Mars is 1,000 times further away than the moon. So you've got a long journey, not only separated by distance, you're also separated by time, because even with communications traveling at the speed of light, it can take up to 24 minutes to get a signal to Mars and then another 24 minutes back again. So if you've got a whole Houston, we've got a problem issue, then it's going to be 48 minutes. You've probably lost your crew. So we need to be confident that we can live and work in space in a close place like the moon before we can take that long journey to Mars.
It's such a fascinating area, isn't it? Because we spoke a couple of weeks ago to an expert in space, and they were talking about absolutely trillions of galaxies. And when you think about the planets, there's more planets in all of these galaxies than grains of sand on beaches. We're really just touching the surface, aren't we?
Oh, absolutely. Look, and the work that organisations like, the CSIRO, our National Science Agency, and NASA working together, doing this kind of effort to help us learn more about the universe together. And this is the great lesson of space exploration. It is all about cooperation. Many nations working together to help us learn more about our world, particularly, and our universe around us. If we can learn more about doing that kind of work together out there, imagine what we can achieve down here.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing is, it costs a lot of money. So even a day like today would have probably cost billions of dollars.
Well, yeah, actually, to put this in perspective, if you think of NASA, and we'll use them as the example, their entire annual budget this year will be about $24.3 billion US. And that sounds like a lot of money, but actually in the United States this year, just on Valentine's Day, they spent over $26 billion just on a single day buying chocolates and flowers. It's kind of cheaper to say I love you.
Yeah, well, the technology's changed enormously as well, hasn't it? Often there's been analogies made to what happened back in 1969 and say there's more technology in your iPhone. Things have gone through the roof.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about the Space Launch System rocket. It's actually using the best of technology that we've developed, particularly over the last 40 years. A lot of the components on that rocket is actually from the space shuttle era. In fact, all the engines are flight-proven engines, which is something you really want to have when you're launching a new rocket for the very first time, to have components that you actually know work on a regular basis. So they'll develop this vehicle more. This vehicle is designed to be sort of multiply expandable, so you can add components to it to lift heavier payloads, take components of a new space station to orbit around the moon, the Lunar Gateway in the future, and to take components that will eventually land on the surface of the moon and start building up that base of operations. So this is a rocket design. While it sounds expensive to go for a launch, but that $4 billion for this rocket has been spent over the last 15 years. It's kind of the equivalent of, every American taxpayer buying one coffee and drinking it over a 15-year period. So the costs sound big, but relatively small.
Does someone like you who works in this space still get amazed or gobsmacked about, looking up into the sky and thinking, what's out there?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, last night while waiting for this launch, I spent a few hours sort of staring at the night sky out there and watching the moon drift by and, set below our local horizon, and just thinking that in the next few years, we're going to have humans back on the surface of the moon. And that takes me back to when I was just 7 years old, watching Armstrong take those very first steps. I can't wait for 2025 and the first woman and the first people of colour and the next man walks on the surface of our near neighbour in space, the moon.
Yeah, absolutely. And Glenn, just finally, what do we know about the moon? Have we learnt much?
Yeah, I mean, we've learned a lot, certainly over the last 60 years or so, about our moon. One of the great things about the Apollo program was when we brought back samples from the moon, we realised just how related our two worlds are. And actually now know that the moon was actually born of the Earth from a collision with that original planet over 4.5 billion years ago, splitting pieces away to reform to become the moon that we know today. So kind of the moon is our child, but we've only been to a few places on the moon with the Apollo missions. We've mapped it from orbit, but there's still so much to learn. There's so many places we haven't gone to. That's why Artemis wants to go to the south pole of the moon, where there are deep craters that haven't received sunlight in them for billions of years, where water ice has collected over time. And that's a resource that we can use for space travel into the future.
Glenn, great to chat. We'll wait for October and hopefully a successful launch.
Thanks very much. We're looking forward to it. We're ready here at the CSIRO. Can't wait for it to happen.